In this video, we're going to go over configuring DHCP servers on Cisco routers and using an actual DHCP server. So this is the same network that we use for setting up our simulated ISP. In this case, we're going to focus down over here on the 192.168.1.0 network. And we're going to start off with configuring the router 1 to hand off the DHCP stuff. But before we get to that, we have to identify some IP addresses that we want to make sure we exclude from the DHCP pool. So first off, this interface right here on G00, we see 192.168.1.1. So we want to make sure we don't give out the router's IP address via DHCP. And this PC1 is statically set with the 192.168.1. Oh, that was supposed to be 1.3 IP address. So we want to make sure we don't give out that IP address either. So we want to keep those two addresses out, and we can use the rest of that pool. So we've determined, which ones that we have here and which ones we don't want to use. Now we have to go into the router itself, and we actually have to build the DHCP pool. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and get into our enable mode, config T. And what we're going to do is we need to build the pool. So we're going to do DHCP, IP DHCP, and then we have to give it a it's a pool, and then we have to give it a name. So we can just call it LAN. It's all we're going to call it. You can call it your own network. You can call it the name of the business or something like that. So we're going to give it IP DHCP pool LAN. Now what we have to do is we have to set the network. So we have to say network, and then I'm just going to move this over so we can see. So the network we're doing is 192.168.1.0/24. So network is 192.168.1.0, and then 255.255.255.0, which is a /24. So we've given it the network name. Now we also want to assign the DNS servers. So we need to do DNS server, and we're going to say it's 10.0.0.100. So there, we've assigned our DNS servers. We need to tell it what the default gateway is. So default -router, in this case it's going to be 192.168.1.1. And then we've pretty much got it done. The only last thing we have to do is we have to set up the lease times. And those commands are unfortunately not available in Cisco Packet Tracer. By default, Cisco Packet Tracer or DHCP leases are set for every 24 hours. You can configure those in a real live server, a real live router, whether it's a Cisco router, your home Linksys router, or whatever you're using. You can set up the DHCP times, the lease times, to be as long as you want. By default, they're 24 hours. If you're doing something like in ISP, where you're setting up a whole bunch of home people that have, DSL modems or cable modems or something like that, and they may be offline for, a couple days or something like that each week, you may not want to give out those IP addresses as fast. So say you set up their lease time for 1 week. So then if they're offline for 2-3 days, they come back on, they still get the same IP. So we've set this all up, but we've neglected one thing. We didn't exclude the addresses. So we're going to get out of here. And what we need to do is we have to use the term exclude, IP exclude, IP DHCP excluded addresses. And then what we have to do is we have to give it the low end IP address, so 192.168.1.1. And then we have to give it the high address, or if it's just a single one, we can just do enter. And then so 3. So right now what we've done is we've excluded the IP address for this G00 interface on the router and the 192.168.1.3 address for PC1. Now something that is not inherently obvious with Cisco's, and I know for a little while I struggled with this, is you're like, oh, I need to assign this to the G00 interface. No, you don't, because it looks at the network 192.168.1.0. So if I do a show, let's get out of here, show IP int brief, and it looks and it says, hey, the network is attached to G00, so that DHCP pool is going to be used exclusively on G00. So right now, if we come back over here and let's go to our end devices, we're going to put in a new PC right here. we're going to connect the PC. We'll give it fast Ethernet 0. We're going to put it in 2. And we're going to come in here to the IP configuration. We're going to set it up for DHCP. And give it a second here. And look, it says DHCP failed. So let's see, let's investigate why that happened. Why that happened right now is because this link is not up yet. So if we fast forward a little bit, we see the link is up. Let's go back over here, and you can see it's automatically pulled the DHCP information. So it's got the 1.2, it's got the subnet, it's got the default router, and the DNS that we programmed. So if we come right over here and we want to just test it, we want to go to a web browser and go to www.test.com, where you can see that it pulls right up. So it's configured and pulled all the information that it needed. So the other thing that you can do is you can do this via a server on here. So we're going to go ahead and pull up this server. And what we're going to do first is we're going to come in here. We're going to remove big T, no IP DHCP pool LAN. So what we've done is we've removed the DHCP pool from the server. So this is going to come back, should get in a PIPA address. Yep, right here. The automatic assign 169.254. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to connect in this server. We're going to connect it into Fast Ethernet 3. We're going to come into the server here. We're going to configure it. Oops. Desktop IP. We're going to give it 192.168.1.2. That subnet mask default gateway 192.168.1.1. 10.0.0.100. Okay. So now let's fast forward here. Let's make sure that we've got connectivity. Ping 192.168.1.1. You can see we've got connectivity. So now what we need to do is we need to assign this. Let's just make sure we're clear. DHCP server. We want this to start assigning the IP addresses over here to like PC3 and so on and so forth. So we come into here. We go to Services, DHCP, and then Server Pool. We can call this one LAN again. Program in the default gateway 1.1. DNS server is 10.0.0.100. Starting IP address and then the ending. So in this case now, we don't want to use .1 because that's the routers. We don't want to use .2 because that's going to be the DHCP server, and we don't want to use .3. So our starting address is going to be 192.168.1.4. Our subnet mask is the full class C. And this, we want to set up the maximum number of users. So let's reduce that size. Let's say only 100. And then we can just hit save. And then actually let's remove, there we go. And then that turn on the service. And if we go back over here and we toggle this, and you can see we got all the information except we didn't pull the default gateway properly. Services, DHCP, there we go. We've got a default gateway. So why did that not pull properly? So apparently this must be a bug in Cisco Packet Tracer because it's definitely programmed correctly and it is definitely pulling. So let's go here, IP config. It's definitely behaving properly. So I don't know why that is happening. Yeah, so it's definitely a bug if you use something besides server pool. But if we go back here and we just want to double check again, let's go to Lowe's. Let's go to google.com. Yep. So those are the two different ways that you can do that. You can set it up with a DHCP actual server, or you can set it up on the router itself. There are benefits to both. If you have a simple network, setting it up on the router is the quick, fast, easiest way. You don't have to have a separate server. If you have a larger network and stuff like that, you want to manage those IP addresses a little bit more yourself, or especially if your router is only the external gateway. Internally, you can set up a DHCP server to track all that stuff. If you need something for authentication and logging, setting up your own internal server is a nice thing that you can do for that type of stuff. But the big difference between the two is how hard it is to exclude DHCP addresses. In this case, I have to set up a different pool for each one of those addresses to be excluded, because here it's just a range. I have to do 0 to 252 that I'm allowed to use. Whereas in the router, I could just set up the excluded addresses. So again, quick, easy DHCP setup so that you can save some time. You don't have to hand jam every single end device. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the forum or contact your instructor. Thanks.